On the happiest day of her life, a woman walks down the aisle ready to start a new chapter. But just as she reaches her groom, her 10-year-old son suddenly blocks her path. "Mom, you can't marry him," he cries, his voice shaking. "He's the reason Dad is gone." Gasps fill the church. The groom's face turns pale. And in that moment, the perfect wedding shatters into a nightmare. What secret is he hiding? And how far will a mother go to uncover the truth? Stay with us, because this story will leave you speechless. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows, casting a warm glow on Imani's tired face as she lifted her coffee mug for another sip. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of a restless night spent tossing and turning, her mind racing with thoughts of Ethan and his deception. The kitchen counter was littered with empty coffee cups, a testament to her early start. Malik sat at the kitchen table, his fingers moving swiftly across his laptop keyboard. His brow was furrowed in concentration, reminding Imani so much of Jamal that her heart ached. The boy had insisted on helping, refusing to go to school today. After everything that had happened, she couldn't bring herself to argue. "Mom," Malik called out, not looking up from his screen. "I found something about one of Ethan's old cases. It's from when he first started as a lawyer." Before Imani could respond, 3 sharp knocks at the door announced Tasha's arrival. Imani hurried to let her friend in, grateful for the support. Tasha entered, laptop bag slung over her shoulder, her usual bright smile replaced by determination. "Girl, you look like you haven't slept a wink," Tasha said, pulling Imani into a quick hug. She smelled of jasmine perfume and coffee, a comforting combination. "That obvious, huh?" Imani tried to smile but couldn't quite manage it. "I've been up since 4, couldn't stop thinking about everything." They settled around the kitchen table, laptops open, creating a small command center of sorts. Tasha pulled out a notebook and several USB drives. "I called in some favors at the bank," she said, her voice low. "Got some interesting information about Ethan's accounts." Malik's eyes lit up. "Really? What kind of information?" "Several large deposits," Tasha explained, plugging in one of the drives. "All from shell companies. The kind of setup people use when they don't want money traced back to them." Imani leaned forward, her coffee forgotten. "Show me." They spent the next hour combing through financial records, following money trails that seemed to lead nowhere and everywhere at once. Imani's marketing background helped her spot patterns in the transactions, while Tasha's banking expertise filled in the technical gaps. "Look at this," Imani pointed to her screen. "These payments started right around the time Jamal was arrested." Her voice cracked slightly on his name. Malik, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly straightened in his chair. "Mom, I think I know someone who could help." He turned his laptop around, showing a news website. "Sean Mathis. He's famous for exposing corruption. He even brought down that crooked judge last year." Imani recognized the name. Mathis had a reputation for being relentless in his pursuit of truth, regardless of who got hurt in the process. His stories had toppled powerful figures and exposed deep-rooted corruption. Tasha's expression turned worried. "Hold up. You sure you want to go that route? Once we involve a journalist, there's no turning back. This becomes public. Everything about you, Jamal, Malik. Are you ready for that kind of exposure?" The kitchen fell silent. Sunlight caught the steam rising from Imani's coffee cup, creating dancing shadows on the wall. She looked at Malik, seeing the hope in his eyes, then at the scattered papers and laptops containing evidence of Ethan's duplicity. "What choice do we have?" Imani's voice was soft but firm. "We've tried working through the system. We've tried being quiet about it. Look where that got us. Look where it got Jamal. Maybe it's time to make some noise." Malik reached across the table and squeezed his mother's hand. "Dad deserves to have his story told, Mom. The truth needs to come out." Tasha nodded slowly. "You're right. And if anyone can get to the bottom of this, it's Mathis. He's got resources we don't have, connections we can't access." Imani pulled out her phone, staring at it for a long moment. Her hands trembled slightly as she found Mathis's contact information on his website. This was it, the point of no return. Once she made this call, there would be no going back to her quiet life. She thought about Jamal, about the years stolen from him, about Malik growing up without his father. She thought about Ethan's smooth lies and practiced charm, about all the other lives he might have destroyed. Her finger hovered over the call button. "Do it, Mom," Malik whispered, his young face set with determination. Imani pressed dial, her heart pounding. The phone rang 3 times before a gruff voice answered. "This is Mathis. Who's this?" Imani took a deep breath, feeling Malik's hand still in hers, seeing Tasha's encouraging nod. "I have a story for you," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "And it might just change everything." Imani's hands trembled slightly as she pulled into Ethan's circular driveway, the gravel crunching softly beneath her tires. The massive colonial-style house loomed before her, its pristine white exterior and perfectly manicured lawn, a testament to Ethan's obsession with maintaining appearances. Through her rearview mirror, she watched Tasha park her car discreetly around the corner, just as they had planned. "Text me if you see him coming," Imani had told her friend earlier. "I'll need at least 2 minutes to get out." Now, sitting in her car, Imani's heart hammered against her ribs. The house stood silent and still, exactly as she expected with Ethan at his afternoon meeting. She glanced at her watch. 2:15 p.m. The meeting wouldn't end until 4 p.m., giving her plenty of time. Still, her fingers felt cold as she pulled the spare key from her purse. "You should have one," Ethan had said months ago, pressing the key into her palm with that charming smile of his. "After all, we'll be married soon." The memory made her stomach turn. Imani stepped out of her car, her heels clicking against the concrete pathway leading to the front door. Each step felt heavy, deliberate. The key slid smoothly into the lock, and the door opened with a soft click that seemed thunderous in the afternoon quiet. The foyer greeted her with its familiar marble floors and crystal chandelier. Everything in its perfect place, just like Ethan himself, on the surface. Imani moved quickly but carefully through the house, her footsteps muffled by the plush carpet. The hallway leading to Ethan's home office seemed longer than she remembered. Inside the office, heavy curtains filtered the afternoon sunlight, casting the room in shadows. The space smelled of leather and expensive cologne, Ethan's signature scent. His massive mahogany desk dominated the room, its surface meticulously organized with files and folders arranged in perfect alignment. Imani's hands shook as she began opening drawers, careful to memorize the exact position of everything she touched. The first 2 drawers contained nothing but standard office supplies and current case files. The third drawer stuck slightly, locked. Her heart jumped. She ran her fingers along the underside of the desk, remembering how Ethan always kept spare keys hidden. There, a small piece of tape. Her fingers found the cool metal of a key beneath it. The locked drawer opened with a soft click that seemed to echo through the quiet house. Inside, she found what looked like hastily shredded documents stuffed into a manila envelope. Beneath them lay a half-burnt letter, its edges black and crumbling. Imani carefully lifted it, her breath catching as she read the visible portions. "Offshore facility in operation. Payments through Shell Corporation. Must maintain absolute discretion." Her phone came out quickly and she snapped several photos, making sure to capture every angle of the damaged document. Her fingers trembled as she carefully replaced everything exactly as she had found it. Just as she was closing the drawer, a sound froze her in place, the distinct creak of the front door opening. Imani's heart stopped. The sound of footsteps in the foyer sent panic shooting through her veins. She quickly pushed the drawer closed, her movements careful despite her racing pulse. The key. She had to return it. With trembling fingers, she pressed the tape back under the desk, securing the key in place. The footsteps grew closer. Imani could hear them moving down the hallway, the familiar rhythm of Ethan's expensive Italian shoes against the hardwood floors. Her mind raced through escape routes. The back door. It was her only chance. Moving as quietly as possible, she crept toward the French doors that led to the back patio. Each step felt like an eternity, each breath too loud in her ears. She could hear Ethan's voice now, likely on a phone call, growing closer by the second. The French doors opened silently. Thank goodness Ethan was meticulous about maintaining everything in his house. Imani slipped through, pulling them closed behind her with excruciating slowness. The afternoon air hit her face as she moved quickly but quietly across the patio, her heart threatening to burst from her chest. She rounded the corner of the house, keeping close to the walls, making her way toward the front where Tasha waited. Behind her, through the open windows, she heard Ethan's voice rise in alarm. "Who's been in my office?" Imani's legs carried her faster, adrenaline coursing through her body as she finally reached Tasha's car. She yanked the door open and slipped inside, ducking down in the passenger seat just as Ethan's shadow appeared at his office window. "Drive," she whispered to Tasha, her voice barely audible over the pounding of her heart. "Drive now." The morning sun barely filtered through the grimy windows of the Daily Grind, a forgotten coffee shop tucked away in a less traveled part of downtown. Imani sat in a worn leather booth, her fingers wrapped around her third cup of coffee. The bitter liquid had long since gone cold, but she barely noticed, her attention fixed on her phone screen. Tasha stood near the entrance, pretending to browse through a rack of local newspapers while keeping watch. Her eyes darted between the door and Imani every few seconds, her shoulders tense with worry. "Any word yet?" Tasha whispered, sliding into the booth across from Imani. Imani shook her head, her dark curls falling forward as she refreshed her email for what felt like the 100th time. "Nothing. But they said they'd contact me this morning." The cafe was nearly empty, save for an elderly man solving crossword puzzles by the window, and a young barista who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. The smell of coffee and day-old pastries hung heavy in the air, mixing with the musty scent of old leather seats and worn wooden floors. "I still think we should have brought backup," Tasha muttered, drumming her fingers nervously on the sticky tabletop. "What if this person is connected to Ethan?" "That's exactly why we couldn't bring anyone else," Imani replied, her voice low but firm. "We don't know who we can trust anymore." Just then, Imani's phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with a new notification. Her heart jumped into her throat as she opened the email from an address that was nothing but a string of random numbers and letters. "It's here," she breathed, her hands shaking slightly as she tilted the screen so Tasha could see. The message was brief and direct. "If you want answers, come alone. Meet me at Pier 17, tonight at 11 p.m. Tasha's sharp intake of breath matched the chill that ran down Imani's spine. Pier 17 was an abandoned shipping dock, the kind of place where good things rarely happened, especially after dark. "No way," Tasha said immediately, reaching across the table to grab Imani's wrist. "This screams setup. It's too dangerous." Imani stared at the message, reading it over and over. The logical part of her brain agreed with Tasha. Meeting a stranger at an abandoned pier in the middle of the night was the beginning of every crime show she'd ever watched. But something deeper, maybe maternal instinct or just pure desperation, told her this might be their only chance. "I have to go," she said quietly, looking up to meet Tasha's worried gaze. "We're running out of options, and whoever this is might have the evidence we need to clear Jamal's name." "Think about Malik," Tasha pleaded. "What if something happens to you?" "I am thinking about Malik," Imani replied, her voice growing stronger. "He deserves to know his father. He deserves to have his family whole again." She paused, taking a deep breath. "And I owe it to Jamal to make this right." The young barista approached their table with a coffee pot, but Tasha waved her away. The girl shrugged and shuffled back to the counter, leaving them alone with their tension. Imani's fingers hovered over her phone screen for a moment before she typed out a response. "I'll be there." "At least let me come with you," Tasha tried one last time. "I can wait in the car just in case." "No," Imani cut her off gently. "They said to come alone. We can't risk scaring them off." She reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. "But I'll keep my phone on, and I'll text you every 15 minutes if you don't hear from me." "Don't," Tasha interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. "Don't even finish that sentence." Imani closed her phone and exhaled deeply, setting it face down on the table. The weight of her decision settled over her like a heavy blanket. The cafe's old clock ticked loudly from the wall, counting down the hours until her meeting, until she either discovered the truth that could save her family or walked straight into a trap. Tasha's worry was written plainly across her face, but she knew better than to argue further. Instead, she signaled the barista for fresh coffee. They had a long day ahead of them, and neither woman would be getting much sleep tonight. The streetlights cast eerie shadows across the concrete walls of the parking garage as Imani pulled her car into a spot near the edge of the docks. Her hands trembled slightly as she turned off the engine, and she took a deep breath to steady herself. The rhythmic sound of waves crashing against the pier provided an ominous backdrop to the night. She checked her phone one last time. 10:55 p.m. Early, but better than being late. The garage was nearly empty, with only a few cars scattered across its vast expanse. The wind howled through the open structure, making her pull her jacket tighter around herself as she stepped out of the car. The click of her boots echoed off the concrete walls as she made her way toward Pier 17. Every shadow made her heart skip a beat. Every distant sound caused her to glance over her shoulder. Tasha's words of warning rang in her ears. This screams setup. But she had to know the truth. The bitter wind whipped against her face as she reached the edge of the garage where it opened to the pier. The moonlight reflected off the dark water, creating dancing patterns that seemed to mock her nervousness. She checked her surroundings again, making sure she hadn't been followed. A figure emerged from the shadows, causing her to take an instinctive step back. It was a middle-aged man, probably in his 50s, wearing a dark overcoat that seemed too heavy for the weather. The most striking feature was a long scar that ran down his right cheek, visible even in the dim light. "You're braver than I thought," he muttered, his voice gravelly and low. He kept his distance, hands visible at his sides, a deliberate gesture meant to show he wasn't a threat. Imani stood her ground, forcing her voice to remain steady. "Who are you?" "David Morton. I used to work at Harrison and Walsh with Ethan." He pulled out a pack of cigarettes, his hands shaking slightly as he lit one. The orange glow briefly illuminated his face, highlighting the deep lines of worry etched around his eyes. "Why did you want to meet me?" Imani asked, watching him carefully. Morton took a long drag from his cigarette before reaching into his coat pocket. Imani tensed, but he only pulled out a small USB drive. "Because I can't live with it anymore. The guilt, the lies, what we did to your husband." He held out the USB drive and Imani hesitated before taking it. "What's on this?" "Everything. Bank transfers, offshore accounts, communications between Ethan and the trafficking ring's leaders." He exhaled a cloud of smoke that dissipated in the wind. "Most importantly, proof that Ethan orchestrated the whole thing to frame Jamal." Imani's fingers tightened around the USB drive. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it over the wind and waves. "Why are you helping me?" Morton's face twisted with what looked like genuine remorse. "Because I helped Ethan do it. I helped him create the paper trail that put your husband away." He took another drag of his cigarette, his hand trembling. "And I regret it every single day." "You helped destroy my family," Imani said, her voice tight with anger. "Why should I trust anything you give me?" "You shouldn't," he replied honestly. "But everything on that drive is real. I kept copies of everything. Insurance, I told myself. But really, I think I knew someday I'd need to make this right." The wind picked up, carrying the smell of salt water and tobacco. Morton glanced nervously over his shoulder before continuing. "Listen carefully. Ethan is dangerous. More dangerous than you know. He won't let you expose him without a fight." "I'm not afraid of him," Imani declared, though her racing heart suggested otherwise. "You should be," Morton warned, dropping his cigarette and crushing it under his shoe. "He's got powerful friends, connections in places you wouldn't believe. When he realizes what's happening, he'll come at you with everything he has." Imani clutched the USB drive tighter. "Then why give me this? Why put yourself at risk?" "Because someone needs to stop him, and you're the only one who's gotten this close." He pulled his coat tighter around himself. "The files are encrypted. Password is Redemption 1983, all lowercase, no spaces." Without another word, Morton turned and walked away, his figure quickly swallowed by the shadows between the parking garage's concrete pillars. The sound of his footsteps faded into the night, leaving Imani alone with the howling wind and crashing waves. She stood there for a moment, gripping the USB drive so tightly her knuckles turned white. This small piece of plastic and metal held the key to everything. Proof of Jamal's innocence, evidence of Ethan's crimes, the truth she'd been searching for all these years. Her hand shook as she slipped it into her pocket, feeling its weight like a stone against her leg. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan's luxurious penthouse, casting long shadows across the polished hardwood floors. Imani's heels clicked sharply against the wood as she stormed through the front door, her hand clutching the USB drive so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her heart thundered in her chest, but her face remained set in determined anger. Ethan stood in his open-concept kitchen looking perfectly at ease in designer loungewear, his hair still slightly mussed from sleep. He lifted a steaming cup of coffee to his lips, his expression one of mild amusement as he watched her approach. "I was wondering when you'd show up," he smirked, setting his cup down on the marble countertop with deliberate slowness. The casual way he stood there, acting as if this were just another morning, made Imani's blood boil. All those years of sweet talks and promises, all those moments she'd believed his lies, they flashed through her mind like a twisted slideshow. "You bastard," she spat, closing the distance between them in quick strides. With trembling hands, she slammed the USB drive onto the kitchen island between them. The sharp sound echoed through the spacious room. Ethan didn't even flinch. He merely glanced at the drive, then back at her, his eyes holding a hint of mockery. "And what's this supposed to be?" "You know exactly what it is." Imani's voice shook with rage. "You framed Jamal. You destroyed my life. You lied to me." Each accusation came out louder than the last, her voice rising with years of pent-up pain and anger. Ethan picked up his coffee again, taking another leisurely sip before responding. He leaned back against the counter, his posture relaxed, almost bored. "So what? What are you going to do about it?" His cavalier response stunned Imani for a moment. She had expected denial, maybe even anger, but this cold indifference was somehow worse. "How can you stand there and act like this is nothing? You sent an innocent man to prison. You tore apart our family." "Business is business, Imani," Ethan shrugged, setting his cup down again. "Jamal was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He made a convenient scapegoat. That's all there is to it." Imani's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to stand straight, to meet his cold gaze with one of her own. "I'm going to expose you. Every single thing you did, the trafficking ring, the cover-up, framing Jamal, all of it." Something shifted in Ethan's expression then, a darkness creeping into his eyes that she'd never seen before. He stepped closer to her, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "That would be a mistake." "Are you threatening me?" Imani didn't back away, though every instinct screamed at her to run. "I'm giving you friendly advice." Ethan's voice was smooth as silk, but there was steel underneath. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into. The people involved in this, they're not the kind you want to cross." "I don't care who they are," Imani shot back. "I'm not afraid of you." Ethan's lips curved into a chilling smile that didn't reach his eyes. "You should be." He picked up the USB drive, turning it over in his hands. "Do you really think this is the only copy? That I don't already know about David Morton's little crisis of conscience?" Imani's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her face neutral. "You're not as smart as you think you are, Ethan." "No?" He set the drive back down and took a step closer. "I managed to fool you for years, didn't I? The devoted fiancé. So understanding about your complicated past with Jamal. So supportive of Malik." His smile widened. It was almost too easy. The casual mention of her son's name made Imani's stomach turn. "Stay away from my family." "Or what?" Ethan challenged. "You'll go to the press, the police? Think carefully about your next move, Imani. You're not the only one with evidence." He walked around the kitchen island, closing the distance between them. What would happen to Malik if people started asking questions about where you were the night the trafficking ring was busted? There are some interesting security camera footage from that evening. You're bluffing, Imani said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Am I? Ethan reached out and traced a finger along her jaw. Imani jerked away from his touch. Are you willing to bet your son's future on that? Imani glared at him, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. I'm not afraid of you. Ethan stepped back, spreading his hands in a gesture of mock surrender. His smile was cold and confident. You should be. Without another word, Imani turned and walked toward the door, her back straight, her steps measured. She could feel Ethan's eyes on her as she left, could practically sense the smug satisfaction radiating from him. But she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her run. As the door closed behind her, she heard Ethan's soft chuckle, and it took every ounce of willpower not to break into a sprint. She knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. Ethan had shown his true colors, and there would be consequences for what she'd done today. Imani sat at her dining room table, her fingers hovering over the laptop keyboard as she stared at the contents of the USB drive. The afternoon light filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow on the stack of printed documents beside her. Each page told a story of deception, each transaction revealing another layer of Ethan's carefully constructed web of lies. I can't believe how detailed this is, she muttered, scrolling through another spreadsheet. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen for hours, but she couldn't stop. Bank transfers, shell companies, everything. Tasha paced behind her, her footsteps creating a steady rhythm on the hardwood floor. So, what's the plan? She stopped to lean over Imani's shoulder, squinting at the screen. There's enough here to bury Ethan 10 times over. Imani rubbed her temples, trying to organize her thoughts. We need to make this public, not just through legal channels. Ethan has too many connections there. She reached for her phone. Remember that journalist Malik mentioned, Sean Mathis? The investigative reporter? Tasha pulled up a chair. He's got a reputation for taking down corrupt officials. Won't back down even when threatened. Exactly what we need. Imani's fingers moved swiftly over her phone screen, pulling up Mathis's contact information. Someone who can't be bought or scared off. The sound of footsteps on the stairs made both women look up. Malik appeared in the doorway, his backpack still slung over one shoulder. His eyes were wide with hope as he looked at the scattered papers and glowing laptop screen. Mom? He asked, his voice small but steady. Are you going to show everyone the truth about Dad? Imani's heart squeezed in her chest. She held out her arm and Malik came to her side, leaning against her. Yes, baby. We're going to make sure everyone knows the truth. If we prove Dad is innocent? Malik's voice wavered slightly. Does that mean he can come home? The question hung in the air, heavy with years of longing and pain. Imani pulled her son closer, pressing a kiss to his forehead. I hope so, baby. She tried to keep her voice steady, but emotion made it thick. That's what we're fighting for. Tasha watched them with soft eyes, then straightened up. Okay, let's do this right. We need to organize everything before we contact Mathis. Make it impossible to ignore. For the next hour, they sorted through the evidence, creating a timeline of Ethan's crimes. Malik helped by organizing the printed documents, his face serious as he handled each page with care. Imani could see so much of Jamal in him at that moment, the same determined set to his jaw, the same careful attention to detail. Finally, Imani picked up her phone again. It's time. She dialed Mathis's number, her hand steady despite the gravity of what she was about to do. Just as she was about to press call, her phone buzzed with a text message. Unknown number. The words made her blood run cold. You're making a mistake. Walk away. Tasha noticed her expression change. What is it? Imani showed her the message. Malik peered at it too, his face darkening. Is that from Ethan? Probably. Imani's jaw clenched. He's trying to scare us off. Mom? Malik's voice was firm. We're not going to stop, right? Imani looked at her son at the strength and hope in his eyes. She thought of Jamal, of all the years stolen from them. The fear that had gripped her moments ago transformed into something else, a burning anger that swept away all hesitation. "No, baby, we're not stopping." She stared at the threatening message one last time, her resolve hardening. It's too late to walk away. With a decisive tap, she deleted the message. The evidence was spread before her, the truth finally in her hands. She looked at Tasha, who nodded encouragingly, and at Malik, who stood straight and proud beside her. She pressed the call button, ready to set everything in motion, ready to fight for her family, for justice, for the truth, ready for war. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead in the downtown office as Imani, Tasha, and Malik sat around the conference table. The room felt smaller than it was, cramped with tension and hope that hung thick in the air. Across from them, Sean Mathis hunched over his laptop, his weathered face illuminated by the screen's blue glow. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as he examined the contents of the USB drive. "This is explosive," he muttered, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. His eyes widened as he scrolled through document after document, each one revealing another layer of Ethan's deception. Imani watched him intently, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Beside her, Malik fidgeted with the sleeve of his hoodie, while Tasha kept glancing between Sean and the door, as if expecting trouble to burst in at any moment. "These financial records," Sean said, turning the laptop so they could see. "The money trail is clear as day. Multiple transfers to offshore accounts, shell companies." He shook his head in disbelief. "And look at this. Documentation of the facility where they're holding Jamal." Imani leaned forward, her heart racing as she studied the screen. The facility looked like a fortress in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by dense West African jungle. "They're operating it under the guise of a work camp for convicted criminals," Sean explained, his voice grave. "But it's really a private prison where they send people they want to disappear." He pulled up another document, pointing to specific sections. "They've got it all wrapped up in legal paperwork that looks legitimate on the surface, but it's all fake." Tasha shifted in her chair, her face etched with concern. "We need to get him out of there," she said. "What about reaching out to international human rights organizations? They must have experience with this kind of situation." Sean nodded slowly. "I have contacts at several organizations. They could help coordinate an extraction, but—" He paused, his expression serious. "You need to understand something, Imani. Going public with this story, it's going to shake things up. Powerful people are going to get hurt and they're going to fight back. Ethan's not going to go down quietly." "I don't care about Ethan anymore," Imani said firmly. "I only care about getting Jamal home." Malik, who had been unusually quiet throughout the meeting, suddenly spoke up. His voice was small but clear in the quiet room. "Mom, what if we're too late?" The fear in his voice made Imani's heart ache. She pushed back her chair and knelt beside him, taking his hands in hers. They felt so small, so young, despite how grown up he tried to act. "Listen to me," she said softly, looking into his eyes. "We're going to bring him home, I promise." She squeezed his hands gently. "Your father is strong, and now we have proof of the truth. We're not going to let anything stop us." Malik nodded, trying to be brave, but Imani could see the worry still lingering in his eyes. She stood up and returned to her seat, more determined than ever. Sean pulled out his phone and dialed a number, speaking in low tones to someone on the other end. The conversation was brief but intense, filled with technical terms and locations that Imani couldn't quite follow. When he hung up, his expression was deadly serious. "My contact in West Africa can help," he said, looking directly at Imani. "But if we do this, there's no turning back. Once we start publishing the story and moving on the extraction, everything's going to happen fast. We'll be taking on some very powerful people." Imani met his gaze without hesitation, her voice steady and clear. "Then let's get started." The determination in her voice seemed to fill the room, pushing back against the shadows of doubt and fear. Malik sat up straighter in his chair, and Tasha reached over to squeeze Imani's shoulder in support. In that moment, The small conference room felt like the beginning of something much bigger than themselves, the start of a journey that would finally bring justice and reunite their family. The convoy of black SUVs wound its way through the dusty roads of West Africa, kicking up clouds of red earth in their wake. Inside the lead vehicle, Imani's knuckles were white as she gripped her seatbelt, her heart hammering against her ribs. The air conditioning struggled against the oppressive heat, but she barely noticed, focused entirely on what lay ahead. Sean Mathis sat beside her, his usual gruff demeanor replaced by intense concentration as he reviewed a stack of documents. "Once we confirm Jamal is inside, we go in fast, no hesitation." He looked up at Imani, his eyes serious. "Are you ready for this?" Imani nodded, unable to find her voice. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of activity, coordinating with international human rights organizations, securing legal clearances, and arranging the rescue operation. Now, as they approached the facility, everything felt surreal. Through the tinted windows, she caught her first glimpse of the detention center. High concrete walls stretched toward the sky, topped with razor wire that glinted in the harsh sunlight. Guard towers stood at each corner, but they appeared empty, the result of careful negotiations and official pressure from multiple governments. The convoy pulled up to the main gate, and Imani watched as members of the rescue team stepped out of their vehicles. They wore tactical gear marked with the logos of various international organizations, moving with practiced efficiency. The facility's administrator emerged, looking nervous as he examined their documentation. Imani's hands trembled as they were waved through. The SUVs rolled into the compound, tires crunching on gravel. The building itself was a stark concrete structure, its windows narrow and barred. The sight made her stomach turn. This was where Jamal had spent years of his life trapped by Ethan's lies. The rescue team moved swiftly, presenting their clearance orders to the facility staff. International observers in blue vests documented everything with cameras and notepads. Imani followed closely behind as they were led through dim corridors, the air heavy with the smell of mildew and despair. They reached a section of individual cells and Imani's heart nearly stopped. Each step felt like walking through water, her movements slow and dreamlike. Then she saw him, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. Jamal lay on a thin mattress in the corner of his cell, his once strong frame now gaunt and frail. His eyes were closed, his breathing shallow. The sight of him, so changed, so broken, sent tears streaming down Imani's face. "Jamal," she screamed, her voice cracking with emotion. The sound echoed off the concrete walls, raw and desperate. His eyes fluttered open at the sound of her voice. For a moment, he stared at her as if she were a mirage, something his mind had conjured to torment him. Then his cracked lips moved, forming a single word. "Imani?" The rescue team worked quickly to open the cell door, the metal groaning in protest. Imani rushed in, falling to her knees beside him. Her hands hovered over his body, afraid to touch him, afraid he might disappear like smoke. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips when she finally cupped his face. "I'm here," she whispered, her tears falling onto his chest. "I'm here, and I'm taking you home." Medical personnel swarmed around them, checking Jamal's vital signs and preparing him for transport. They worked efficiently but gently, understanding the gravity of the moment. Jamal never took his eyes off Imani, as if memorizing her face all over again. It took 4 people to help him up and out of the cell. His legs were weak from disuse, and he leaned heavily on the support team as they made their way back through the facility. Imani stayed close, her hand finding his whenever possible, unwilling to break contact for more than a few seconds. The sunlight seemed impossibly bright when they emerged from the building. Jamal squinted against it, raising a trembling hand to shield his eyes. They helped him into the SUV, where he collapsed against the leather seat, exhausted by even this small journey. As they settled him in, Jamal's hand found Imani's once more. His grip was weak, but his touch sent electricity through her body. "I knew you'd come," he murmured, his eyes drifting closed with exhaustion. Imani clutched his hand tighter, her thumb tracing circles on his palm. The convoy began to move, leaving behind the facility that had stolen so many years from them. Imani watched Jamal's face as he slept, seeing beneath the changes wrought by captivity to the man she had always loved. They had a long road ahead, recovery, healing, rebuilding their family. But for now, she focused on the steady rise and fall of his chest and the warmth of his hand in hers. The sleek news studio buzzed with anticipation as the red on-air light flickered to life. Behind the polished desk, veteran anchor Diana Chen adjusted her papers, her expression professionally neutral. Across from her sat Ethan Sinclair, the picture of corporate success in his charcoal gray suit and burgundy tie. "Good evening. I'm Diana Chen, and tonight we're speaking with prominent attorney Ethan Sinclair about recent allegations that have shocked the legal community," Diana began, her voice crisp and clear. "Mr. Sinclair, there are allegations linking you to human trafficking. How do you respond?" Ethan's lips curved into an easy smile, but his eyes remained cold. He let out a carefully practiced chuckle. "It's absurd, Diana. Completely absurd. My fiancée and her son have been manipulated by criminals who are trying to discredit me and my firm." In a modest, safe house across town, Jamal Carter's hands balled into tight fists as he watched the broadcast. His jaw clenched, muscles working beneath the skin that was still too pale from years without sunlight. "He's lying," he growled, his voice rough with emotion. "Every word out of his mouth is a lie." Imani sat beside him on the worn couch, her hand resting protectively on his arm. She could feel the tension radiating through his body, knew how much strength it took for him to stay seated instead of putting his fist through the television screen. Back on the screen, Diana pressed forward. "These are serious accusations, Mr. Sinclair. Documents have surfaced showing suspicious financial transactions linked to offshore accounts." "Let me be clear." Ethan leaned forward, his voice taking on a concerned tone that made Imani's stomach turn. "This is a deeply personal matter that pains me to discuss. Imani, my fiancée, she's been struggling. The stress of single motherhood, the guilt over her ex-husband's conviction, it's taken a toll on her mental state." "That bastard," Jamal whispered, his voice shaking. "After everything he did." Ethan continued his performance, looking directly into the camera with practiced sincerity. "I've tried to support her, to be there for her and her son, but she's become unstable. She's fallen in with people who are feeding her conspiracy theories, and I'm deeply concerned about her well-being." Across town, in a cramped office filled with monitors and coffee cups, Sean Mathis's phone buzzed. The journalist grabbed it, his eyes scanning the encrypted message that appeared. His expression darkened as he read. "Mr. Sinclair?" Diana's voice cut through the tension. "Are you suggesting that these allegations are completely fabricated?" "Absolutely," Ethan nodded, straightening his tie. "In fact, my legal team is considering action to protect my reputation and hopefully get Imani the help she needs. This whole situation—" He paused, allowing his voice to catch slightly. "It's heartbreaking, really." In the safe house, Tasha burst through the door, laptop in hand. "You need to see this," she said breathlessly. "Sean just sent it over. Ethan's trying to wipe everything clean. Bank records, emails, all of it. He's got a team working around the clock to erase his digital footprint." On the screen, Ethan was wrapping up his interview with practiced charm. "I just want what's best for everyone involved. Sometimes people we love can be led down dangerous paths, and it's our responsibility to help them find their way back." Diana nodded professionally. "Thank you for speaking with us tonight, Mr. Sinclair. We'll continue to follow this developing story." The broadcast cut to commercial, and Imani grabbed the remote, jabbing the power button with such force that her finger hurt. The screen went black, but the echo of Ethan's lies seemed to hang in the air like poison. Her whole body trembled with rage as she turned to look at Jamal. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw the same fire that burned in her heart. Years of injustice, of separation, of pain. All of it caused by the man who had just tried to paint her as unstable on national television. "Then we hit him where it hurts," Imani declared, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. Sean, who had arrived during the broadcast, nodded from his position by the window. His fingers were already flying across his laptop keyboard. "Let's bring him down," he agreed, not looking up from his screen. Tasha spread several documents across the coffee table, pointing to highlighted sections. He's trying to cover his tracks, but we've got copies of everything. He can't erase what we already have. Jamal reached for Imani's hand, squeezing it gently. Despite his anger, his touch was tender, a reminder of everything they had lost and everything they were fighting to reclaim. The marble halls of the courthouse echoed with each step as Imani made her way to courtroom 3B. Her navy blue suit felt stiff and constraining, but she had chosen it carefully, professional, maternal, responsible. Her mother had always said, "Dress for the battle you're fighting." Beside her, Tasha squeezed her hand. "You've got this," she whispered. "Just stay calm and tell the truth." Imani's throat tightened as they approached the heavy wooden doors. Through the small windows, she could already see Ethan seated at the plaintiff's table, looking immaculate in an expensive charcoal suit. His lawyer, Margaret Wheeler, stood nearby reviewing documents, a shark in designer heels. Taking a deep breath, Imani pushed through the doors. The courtroom smelled of furniture polish and anxiety. Her lawyer, David Chen, waited at the defense table with a reassuring smile. As Imani took her seat, she caught sight of Malik sitting with her mother Evelyn in the gallery. Her son gave her a small wave, trying to look brave despite the fear in his eyes. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Patricia Morrison entered the courtroom. The judge, a stern-faced woman in her 60s, took her seat and adjusted her reading glasses. "We're here today regarding Custody Petition 2023 CV 4587, Sinclair versus Carter," Judge Morrison stated. "Ms. Wheeler, you may proceed with your opening statement." Margaret Wheeler rose smoothly, her heels clicking against the floor. "Your Honor, we're here today because my client, Mr. Ethan Sinclair, has grave concerns about Ms. Carter's fitness as a parent. Over the past month, she has demonstrated increasingly erratic and dangerous behavior." Imani's hands clenched in her lap as Wheeler continued. "She has made unfounded criminal accusations against my client. She has involved her minor son in these false allegations. She has associated with known felons, including her ex-husband who was convicted of human trafficking. Mr. Sinclair seeks temporary custody to ensure young Malik's safety and stability during this troubled time." David Chen stood next, his voice steady and calm. "Your Honor, Ms. Carter is a loving, responsible mother who has raised her son alone for years while building a successful career. These custody proceedings are nothing but retaliation by Mr. Sinclair because Ms. Carter discovered evidence of his criminal activities. We will demonstrate that Mr. Sinclair poses the real danger to Malik's well-being." As the hearing progressed, Wheeler called character witnesses who painted Imani as unstable and reckless. Ethan's testimony was smooth as silk, expressing deep concern about Imani's conspiracy theories and dangerous obsession with clearing her ex-husband's name. When it was Imani's turn to testify, she forced herself to remain composed despite her racing heart. "I have always put Malik first," she stated firmly. "Everything I've done has been to protect him and give him the truth he deserves about his father. And that truth involved breaking into Mr. Sinclair's office, taking confidential documents," Wheeler pressed during cross-examination. "I found evidence that Ethan had framed my ex-husband, evidence that he was involved in human trafficking himself. Evidence that conveniently hasn't led to any charges," Wheeler noted with a raised eyebrow. "Meanwhile, you've exposed your son to this crusade of yours, involving him in your delusions about Mr. Sinclair." From the gallery, Imani heard Malik's small intake of breath. She glanced back to see him whispering to his grandmother, his face pale. "They're trying to take me away from Mom." Evelyn pulled him close, but Imani could see the worry in her mother's eyes. This was exactly what Ethan wanted, to use Malik as leverage, to punish her for exposing his crimes. After hours of testimony, Judge Morrison leaned forward. "This is clearly a complex situation requiring careful consideration. I'm ordering a full custody evaluation before making any permanent decisions. For now, the current custody arrangement will remain in place, but Ms. Carter is ordered to have no contact with Jamal Carter except through counsel. We'll reconvene in 30 days after receiving the evaluator's report." Relief and fear warred in Imani's chest as she stood. She'd kept custody for now, but Ethan's threat still loomed. As she gathered her things, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. Jamal stood behind her, his face lined with concern. "We'll fight this," he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of years spent fighting other battles. Imani looked across the courtroom where Malik waited with Evelyn, then at Ethan's retreating back. Her voice was steel when she replied, "I'm not losing my son." The words weren't just a statement, they were a promise. To herself, to Malik, and to the family they were fighting to rebuild. Ethan might have money and power on his side, but Imani had truth and love on hers, and she would never stop fighting for her child. The hashtag #Ethan Sinclair exposed trended worldwide as documents revealing his offshore accounts and illegal dealings flooded social media. Imani sat at her kitchen table, scrolling through her phone while CNN played in the background. Her hands trembled slightly as she watched the story she had lived through for years finally break into the public consciousness. "Breaking news," the anchor announced, her voice crisp and professional. Documents leaked earlier today appear to show prominent attorney Ethan Sinclair's involvement in an international human trafficking operation. The documents detail extensive offshore accounts and what appears to be systematic corruption spanning several years. Tasha burst through the front door, barely containing her excitement. "Girl, have you seen Twitter? It's absolutely blowing up." She pulled up a chair next to Imani, her phone already in hand. "Look at these numbers. The story's been shared over 1 million times in just 3 hours." Imani nodded, her eyes fixed on the TV screen where Ethan's corporate headshot appeared next to scrolling headlines. A statement from his office crawled across the bottom of the screen. "Mr. Sinclair categorically denies all allegations. These documents are clearly fabricated in an attempt to damage his reputation. Legal action will be taken against those responsible for spreading these malicious lies." "He's scared," Jamal said from the doorway, his voice still carrying the roughness from his time in captivity. He walked slowly to the table, his body still recovering. "Look at how defensive that statement is. He knows we've got him." Sean Mathis's explosive article had gone live an hour ago, published simultaneously across several major news outlets. The piece was devastating in its detail: bank transfers, shell companies, witness statements, and a clear timeline showing how Ethan had systematically framed Jamal while protecting his wealthy client's trafficking operation. Malik came running down the stairs, his tablet in hand. "Mom, they're talking about us on TikTok." He placed the tablet on the table, showing video after video of people discussing the case, sharing screenshots of documents, and demanding justice. "Even my teachers were talking about it today." "Does this mean we're winning?" Malik asked, his young face full of hope and uncertainty. Imani pulled her son close, running her hand through his hair. "Not yet, baby, but we're getting close." She tried to keep her voice steady, not wanting him to hear her worry. Despite the public outrage, she knew Ethan wouldn't go down without a fight. The TV switched to a live press conference outside Ethan's law firm. He stood at the podium, still wearing his signature confident smile, though Imani could see the strain around his eyes. "These allegations are completely false," Ethan declared, his voice carrying that familiar smooth conviction that had once fooled her. "This is nothing more than a coordinated attack by individuals with personal vendettas. My legal team will be addressing these defamatory claims in court." But unlike before, the reporters weren't buying it. They shouted questions about specific transactions, dates, and names mentioned in the documents. Each question seemed to chip away at Ethan's composure. "Mr. Sinclair, can you explain the $2.3 million transfer to an account in the Cayman Islands? What about the emails discussing the special handling of witnesses? Did you personally oversee the framing of Jamal Carter?" Tasha grabbed Imani's hand as they watched Ethan's facade crack slightly. He ended the press conference abruptly, ignoring the shouted questions as he retreated into the building. "The FBI has announced they're opening an official investigation," Sean said, walking in with his laptop open. He'd been working from Imani's house, coordinating with his sources and following up on new leads. "And 3 of Ethan's biggest clients have already announced they're severing ties with his firm." Imani looked at the breaking news headline flashing across the TV screen. "Attorney Ethan Sinclair linked to international trafficking ring. FBI launches investigation." She turned to Jamal and Sean, her voice firm with determination. "It's time to finish this." The room hummed with nervous energy as phones continued buzzing with notifications. Outside, a news van parked across the street, its satellite dish extending toward the sky. The truth was finally spreading, impossible to contain, impossible to deny. The carefully constructed world Ethan had built was crumbling, one viral post at a time. The night air hung heavy with anticipation as Imani sat at her desk, surrounded by stacks of legal documents. The warm glow of her desk lamp cast shadows across the papers, each one containing evidence that would finally bring Ethan to justice. Her eyes burned from hours of reading, but she couldn't stop now, not when they were so close. From the kitchen, the soft murmur of voices drifted through the house. Jamal and Tasha were going over their strategy one last time, their words occasionally punctuated by the clink of coffee cups. The familiar sounds brought a measure of comfort to Imani's racing thoughts. She glanced at the clock, 11:42 p.m. Malik had gone to bed hours ago, finally surrendering to exhaustion after days of worry. The poor boy had been trying so hard to stay strong through all of this. Imani's heart ached thinking about how much this ordeal had affected him. "We should double-check the financial records again," Jamal's voice carried from the kitchen. "Make sure everything's in order." "Already done," Tasha replied. 3 times. The evidence is solid." Imani smiled slightly, grateful for their dedication. She turned back to the documents, highlighting another crucial piece of evidence. Her hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from sheer determination. The sudden buzz of her phone against the desk made her jump. An unknown number flashed across the screen. Imani's stomach tightened as she stared at it, knowing instinctively who it was. After 3 rings, she picked it up. "Hello?" Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "Walk away from this, Imani." Ethan's voice slithered through the phone, smooth as poison. "Or you'll regret it." Imani's fingers tightened around the phone. In the kitchen, Jamal and Tasha had fallen silent, sensing the tension. "I'm not afraid of you," she said firmly. A low chuckle came through the line. "You should be." The words dripped with menace before the line went dead. Imani set the phone down carefully, her hands shaking slightly. She heard footsteps and looked up to see Jamal standing in the doorway, concern etched across his face. "Ethan?" he asked quietly. She nodded, pushing back from the desk. His last attempt to scare me off. Jamal crossed the room, his presence solid and reassuring. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Imani said, standing up. "Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm ready to end this." Tasha appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "That man doesn't know when to quit, does he?" "He's desperate," Jamal said, his voice hard. "He knows we have him cornered." Imani walked to the window, looking out at the quiet street. Somewhere out there, Ethan was probably sitting in his expensive penthouse, plotting his next move. But this time, he wouldn't win. "I should check on Malik," she said, turning away from the window. She walked quietly to her son's room, pushing the door open gently. Malik lay curled up in his bed, his face peaceful in sleep. A stack of superhero comics sat on his nightstand, his attempt at escape from reality. Imani's heart swelled with love and determination. Back in the study, Jamal was reviewing the documents she'd been working on. He looked up as she entered. "Everything's here, Imani. Every transaction, every lie, every connection to the trafficking ring. He can't wiggle his way out of this one." "He'll try," Tasha said from her perch on the edge of the desk. "You know he will." "Let him," Imani replied, her voice filled with quiet strength. "We have the truth on our side." She sat back down at her desk, pulling another document toward her. The words blurred slightly from fatigue, but she blinked it away. There would be time for rest later, after justice had been served. "You should try to get some sleep," Jamal said softly. "Tomorrow's going to be intense." Imani shook her head. "Not yet. I need to make sure everything's perfect." Tasha placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Imani, the evidence is solid. The witnesses are ready. Sean's article has already turned public opinion against Ethan. You've done everything you can. She's right, Jamal added. You need to be sharp tomorrow, for Malik. At the mention of their son's name, Imani finally relented. She looked at Jamal, determination burning in her eyes. Tomorrow we end this. The words hung in the air, heavy with promise. Outside, a car passed by, its headlights briefly illuminating the room. In his bedroom, Malik turned over in his sleep, unaware of the battle his parents were preparing to fight. Tomorrow would change everything for all of them. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse windows as Imani Carter walked down the marble hallway, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Her navy blue suit was crisp and professional, chosen carefully for this moment. Each step felt heavy with purpose, carrying the weight of everything she'd fought for these past weeks. Tasha squeezed her hand before they entered. "You've got this," she whispered. Inside the courtroom, faces turned as Imani made her way to her seat. The wooden benches were packed with spectators, reporters, and familiar faces from their community. The air felt thick with tension, like a storm about to break. Across the aisle, Ethan sat with his legal team, looking pristine in an expensive charcoal suit. His confident smile never wavered, but Imani noticed the slight tremor in his hands as he adjusted his tie. He was nervous despite his practiced facade. Malik sat in the front row with his grandmother, Evelyn, their hands clasped together. The sight of her son made Imani's heart ache. He looked so small in his pressed shirt and dress pants, trying to be brave. When their eyes met, he gave her a tiny nod that carried all the strength she needed. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Martinez entered, her expression neutral as she took her seat. Ethan's lawyer, Richard Bennett, rose first. His voice carried through the courtroom with practiced precision. "Your Honor, we've demonstrated that Ms. Carter's recent behavior shows a pattern of reckless decision-making that puts her son at risk." He gestured toward Jamal, who sat quietly in the gallery. "She's chosen to associate with a convicted felon, exposing her child to potential danger." Imani's hands clenched in her lap as Bennett continued. "Furthermore, her wild accusations against my client, Mr. Sinclair, show questionable judgment. She's dragged her son into a vindictive campaign based on unfounded allegations." Her lawyer, Sarah Chen, stood next, her posture relaxed but determined. "Your Honor, what we've actually demonstrated is Mr. Sinclair's pattern of manipulation and criminal behavior." She held up a thick folder. "We have substantial evidence linking Mr. Sinclair to an international human trafficking operation, the very crime for which he framed Jamal Carter." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Ethan's jaw tightened visibly. "Mr. Sinclair's attempt to gain custody is nothing more than retaliation against Ms. Carter for exposing his crimes," Chen continued. "This woman has raised her son alone for years, providing a stable, loving home while working full-time. Malik Carter is thriving under her care. His school records and testimonials from teachers prove this." Judge Martinez listened intently, her eyes moving between both parties. When the arguments concluded, she turned her attention to the small figure sitting beside his grandmother. "Malik," she said gently, "would you please stand?" Malik rose slowly, his shoulders straight despite his obvious nervousness. His red tie, the one Jamal had helped him pick out, stood out against his white shirt. "Where do you feel safest?" the judge asked simply. The courtroom fell silent. Malik glanced at his mother, then at Ethan before facing the judge. His voice came out clear and steady. "With my mom." Imani felt tears prick at her eyes, but she blinked them back. Ethan's face darkened almost imperceptibly. "Can you tell me why?" Judge Martinez prompted. "Because she always tells me the truth," Malik said. "She works really hard to take care of me, and—" He paused, gathering courage. "She taught me that doing the right thing is more important than being scared." Judge Martinez nodded thoughtfully, making a few notes before looking up at the courtroom. The silence stretched as she considered her ruling. Imani could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. Finally, the judge spoke. "The purpose of this court is to determine what serves the best interest of the child." She looked directly at Malik. "I've reviewed all the evidence, including school records, character testimonials, and the recent developments regarding Mr. Sinclair's alleged criminal activities. Ethan shifted in his seat, his confident facade cracking slightly. The court rules in favor of Imani Carter. Custody remains with the mother. The words washed over Imani like a wave of relief. She exhaled sharply, feeling weeks of tension release from her shoulders. Beside her, Tasha squeezed her hand in celebration. Ethan stiffened in his chair, his face dark with barely contained rage. His hands gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. His lawyer leaned over, whispering something in his ear, but Ethan shrugged him off. Malik broke into a wide smile, hugging his grandmother before running to embrace his mother. Imani held him close, breathing in the familiar scent of his hair, knowing that finally, they were safe. The judge's gavel came down with a definitive crack. Court is adjourned. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Ethan's corner office, but the morning's brightness did nothing to lift the dark cloud hanging over him. His expensive leather shoes clicked against the hardwood floor as he paced back and forth, his normally perfect hair disheveled from running his fingers through it countless times. The morning newspaper lay crumpled on his desk, its headline screaming, "Prominent lawyer linked to international trafficking ring." His phone hadn't stopped buzzing with calls from reporters, colleagues, and his increasingly concerned lawyer. Ethan yanked open his desk drawer and pulled out his passport, hands trembling slightly as he stuffed it into his jacket pocket. His eyes darted to the computer screen showing his bank accounts, most of them frozen, but he had emergency funds hidden away, just enough to disappear and start fresh somewhere without extradition treaties. "I didn't come this far to lose everything," he muttered, grabbing a pre-packed bag from behind his desk. He'd always kept one ready, just in case. The weight of the cash inside gave him a small measure of comfort. A loud, authoritative knock echoed through his office, making him freeze mid-step. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stared at the door. "Mr. Sinclair," a commanding voice called out. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Open the door." Ethan's mind raced through his options. The window. No, he was 30 floors up. The private elevator? They'd have that covered. His fingers twitched toward his desk phone, considering calling his lawyer, but he knew it was too late for that. Another thunderous knock. "Open up or we're coming in." Ethan straightened his tie and smoothed his hair, desperately trying to maintain his composed facade. "One moment," he called out, his voice steady despite the panic coursing through him. He quickly slipped his phone into his pocket and took a deep breath. The door burst open before he could reach it. 6 FBI agents in tactical gear stormed in, weapons drawn. "Hands where we can see them," the lead agent commanded. Ethan raised his hand slowly, forcing a smile onto his face. "Gentlemen, there seems to be some misunderstanding. I'm sure we can—" "Ethan Sinclair," the agent cut him off, holstering his weapon and pulling out handcuffs. "You are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, and human trafficking." The agent began reciting his Miranda rights as he approached. A cold laugh escaped Ethan's throat. "This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? Who my clients are?" He didn't move as the agents approached, his stance casual and defiant. "I'll have your badges for this." The lead agent reached for Ethan's wrist. "Sir, please turn around and place your hands behind your back." I said, "Do you know who I am?" Ethan's voice rose, the careful mask of control starting to crack. "I'm Ethan fucking Sinclair. You can't—" The cold metal of the handcuffs clicked around his wrists and something inside him snapped. His carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. "No, no, no," he shouted, struggling against the restraints. "You don't understand. I had to do it. They were going to expose everything." His polished appearance deteriorated as he thrashed, his expensive suit becoming disheveled, sweat beading on his forehead. 2 agents grabbed his arms, steadying him as they led him toward the door. His legs wobbled, the reality of his situation finally hitting him. "My lawyer. I need my lawyer," he mumbled, his voice smaller now, uncertain. The elevator ride down was silent except for Ethan's heavy breathing. In the lobby, a crowd of reporters had already gathered, their cameras flashing like strobe lights as the agents led him through the glass doors. Microphones thrust toward his face as reporters shouted questions. "Mr. Sinclair, did you really frame Jamal Carter?" How many people were trafficked through your operation? What do you have to say to the families you've destroyed? A reporter from Channel 7 pushed to the front, shoving her microphone closer. Any last words, Mr. Sinclair? Ethan stopped walking, causing the agents to pause. He lifted his chin, his eyes blazing with fury as he stared directly into the cameras. The morning sun caught his face, highlighting the rage and defiance etched into his features. "This isn't over," he snarled, his voice dripping with venom. The agents tugged him forward, guiding him toward the waiting FBI vehicle. Camera flashes continued to explode around him as they pushed his head down and helped him into the back seat. The door slammed shut, muffling the chaos outside, leaving Ethan alone with the reality of his downfall. The Department of Justice press room buzzed with anticipation. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning strikes, and reporters whispered among themselves, their notepads and recording devices ready. The wood-paneled walls seemed to amplify every sound, making the space feel even more charged with emotion. In the front row, Imani sat between Jamal and Malik, their hands linked in an unbreakable chain. Malik fidgeted in his dress shirt and tie, while Jamal remained perfectly still, his face a mask of careful composure. Imani could feel the slight tremor in Jamal's hand, betraying the storm of emotions beneath his calm exterior. "You okay?" she whispered, giving his hand a gentle squeeze. Jamal nodded, his eyes fixed on the empty podium. Just ready for this to be over, ready to start living again. Malik leaned forward in his chair, his small face serious. "Dad, after this, can we get ice cream?" A smile cracked through Jamal's serious expression. "Ice cream sounds perfect, buddy." The room fell silent as Attorney General Richardson approached the podium, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She adjusted her glasses and cleared her throat, the sound echoing through the microphone. "Good morning," she began, her voice steady and clear. "Today, the Department of Justice is here to right a grievous wrong. After a thorough investigation and review of new evidence, we can definitively state that Jamal Carter was wrongfully convicted of all charges previously held against him." Imani felt Jamal's hand tighten around hers. She glanced at him, seeing the muscle in his jaw working as he fought to maintain his composure. "Mr. Carter spent years of his life imprisoned for crimes he did not commit," Richardson continued. "The evidence clearly shows that he was framed by individuals who have since been arrested and are awaiting trial. Today, we officially clear his name and restore his freedom." The room erupted with the sound of camera shutters and excited murmurs. Malik bounced in his seat, tugging on his father's sleeve. "Dad, they did it! They really did it!" Jamal took a deep breath, and Imani watched as years of tension seemed to melt from his shoulders. A single tear rolled down his cheek, but his smile was brighter than all the camera flashes combined. Reporters began shouting questions, their voices overlapping. "Mr. Carter, how does it feel to be officially cleared? What are your plans now that you're free? Will you be pursuing legal action against those who framed you?" But Jamal didn't seem to hear any of them. He turned to Malik, pulling his son into a tight embrace. "I love you so much, buddy," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. So much." Malik wrapped his arms around his father's neck, burying his face in Jamal's shoulder. "I love you too, Dad." The cameras went wild, capturing this tender moment between father and son. Imani watched them, her own eyes filling with tears. After all the pain, all the fighting, all the fear, they had made it. Their family was whole again. Attorney General Richardson continued speaking, detailing the investigation that had led to this moment, but the words barely registered. All that mattered was right here, in this row of seats, where a family was healing. Several reporters approached their row, microphones extended, but Tasha and other family friends formed a protective barrier, giving them space to process this life-changing moment. "You're finally free," Imani whispered to Jamal, reaching up to wipe a tear from his cheek. Jamal turned to her, his eyes full of love and peace. "I always was," he said softly, squeezing her hand. "I just needed to come home." Malik snuggled between them, creating a perfect family sandwich. The cameras continued to flash, documenting this moment of triumph and redemption. But for the Carters, the world had narrowed to just the three of them, a family reunited stronger than ever, ready to begin their new chapter together. The press conference continued around them, but they remained in their own bubble of joy and relief. The official words of freedom had been spoken, and nothing could take this moment away from them. Years of pain and separation had led to this, a family made whole again, their love having survived the ultimate test. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Imani's home, casting a warm glow on the colorful decorations that filled the living room. Balloons in bright blues and greens bobbed gently in the air conditioning while hand-painted banners proclaimed, "Happy Birthday, Malik," in cheerful letters. The house buzzed with an energy it hadn't known in years. From her spot in the kitchen, Imani watched the scene unfold before her, her heart so full it felt like it might burst. She carefully arranged chocolate cupcakes on a tiered stand, each one topped with swirls of vanilla frosting and rainbow sprinkles. The sight of Jamal helping Malik set up his new gaming system in the living room made her pause, taking in the precious moment. "Need any help?" Tasha appeared beside her, reaching for a paper towel to wipe some stray frosting from the counter. "I think I've got it covered," Imani smiled, her eyes still fixed on her son and his father. "I just can't believe we're all here together." "Well, believe it." Tasha squeezed her friend's shoulder. "You fought hard for this." The doorbell chimed and Malik raced to answer it. "Grandma!" His excited voice carried through the house as Evelyn stepped inside, carrying a large wrapped package. "There's my birthday boy." Evelyn hugged him tight, then looked around the decorated space with approval. "This place looks wonderful, Imani." The afternoon unfolded like a dream. Friends and family filtered in, filling the house with laughter and chatter. Malik moved from group to group, showing off his presence and beaming with joy. But the real surprise came when Jamal pulled him aside, holding a carefully wrapped package. "I've been working on this for a while," Jamal said softly, watching as Malik carefully peeled back the paper. Inside was a leather-bound scrapbook, its cover embossed with Malik's name in gold letters. Malik opened it slowly, his eyes widening at the first page. There he was, just hours old, wrapped in a blue blanket in the hospital. Jamal stood beside the bassinet, looking down at his son with pure love in his eyes. "How did you—" Malik's voice trembled. "Your grandmother kept everything," Jamal explained, sitting beside him on the couch. "Every photo, every little memory. Even when I couldn't be here, she made sure I wouldn't miss a moment." Page after page told the story of Malik's early years. There were photos of his first steps, his first birthday, his first day of preschool. Jamal had written notes beside each picture, sharing his thoughts and feelings about the moments he'd missed. Tears welled up in Malik's eyes as he turned to a page showing him at age 5, dressed as a superhero for Halloween. "I remember this costume," he whispered. "I told Mom I wanted to be brave and strong, just like—" "Just like what?" Jamal asked gently. "Just like I imagined my dad would be," Malik finished, looking up at Jamal with wet eyes. Without warning, he threw his arms around his father's neck, hugging him tight. The room grew quiet as everyone watched the tender moment between father and son. Tasha dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, while Evelyn beamed proudly. Imani leaned against the doorframe, her own tears falling freely. "Thank you, Dad." Malik's voice was muffled against Jamal's shoulder. "This is the best present ever." Jamal held his son close, his own eyes glistening. "I'm just thankful I get to be here now, making new memories to add to this book." The afternoon continued with cake and ice cream, more presents and countless photos to capture every moment. Tasha and Evelyn shared stories from Malik's childhood, making everyone laugh with tales of his adventures and misadventures. As the day began to wind down, Imani brought out Malik's birthday cake, 10 candles glowing brightly in the dimmed room. Everyone gathered around, singing happy birthday, while Malik sat at the head of the table, sandwiched between his parents. Before blowing out the candles, Malik paused, closing his eyes tight. His lips moved silently as he made his wish. "I wish this happiness lasts forever." Imani and Jamal's eyes met over their son's head, a silent understanding passing between them. They had fought so hard to reach this moment, to give their son the family he deserved. Through all the pain and struggle, they had finally found their way back to each other. The candles went out with a single breath and the room erupted in applause. Malik grinned, his face glowing with joy as he looked between his parents. In that moment, surrounded by love and laughter, their little family felt complete at last. The federal courthouse stood imposing against the morning sky, its marble columns gleaming in the early light. Inside, the air felt thick with tension as spectators filed into the crowded courtroom. Ethan Sinclair sat at the defendant's table, his expensive suit showing signs of wear, his normally perfect appearance slightly disheveled. His eyes darted around the room, betraying the anxiety beneath his controlled facade. Imani and Jamal took their seats in the second row, their shoulders touching. Jamal's hand found Imani's, giving it a reassuring squeeze. Behind them, dozens of reporters scribbled in notepads or typed quietly on their phones, knowing they were witnessing what would become one of the decade's most significant corporate crime cases. "All rise," the bailiff's voice boomed through the courtroom. Judge Margaret Henderson, known for her tough stance on white-collar crime, entered with measured steps. Her gray hair was pulled back severely, her expression stern as she took her seat. "Be seated," she commanded, adjusting her reading glasses. "We are here today for the sentencing of Ethan Sinclair, who has been found guilty of multiple federal charges including human trafficking, conspiracy, and fraud." The prosecutor, Sarah Chen, stood up, her red blazer bright against the wooden panels of the courtroom. "Your Honor, the evidence presented during this trial has shown beyond any doubt Mr. Sinclair's direct involvement in a sophisticated criminal enterprise that destroyed countless lives." She walked to the center of the courtroom, her heels clicking against the floor. "We have documented proof of Mr. Sinclair's participation in human trafficking operations across 3 continents. Bank records show transfers totaling over $50 million to offshore accounts used to fund these operations." Ethan's jaw clenched as Chen continued. "Furthermore, we have demonstrated how Mr. Sinclair deliberately framed an innocent man, Jamal Carter, allowing him to suffer in prison while continuing his criminal activities. The prosecution recommends the maximum sentence allowed by law." Ethan's defense attorney, looking defeated, made a half-hearted attempt to argue for leniency. "Your Honor, my client has no prior criminal record. He has been a respected member of the business community." Judge Henderson cut him off with a wave of her hand. "Counsel, your client's position of respect and authority makes these crimes even more egregious. He used his privilege and power to prey on the vulnerable." The judge turned her attention to Ethan. "Mr. Sinclair, would you like to make a statement before I pronounce your sentence?" Ethan stood slowly, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, I maintain my innocence. This is nothing more than a witch hunt orchestrated by a vengeful ex-fiancée and her criminal ex-husband." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Imani felt Jamal's hand tighten around hers, but they remained silent, watching as Ethan's last attempt at manipulation fell flat. Judge Henderson's voice cut through the whispers like steel. "Mr. Sinclair, the evidence against you is overwhelming. Multiple witnesses have testified to your direct involvement in these crimes. Your own documents and communications prove your guilt beyond any doubt." She leaned forward, her eyes boring into Ethan. "You have shown no remorse, no acknowledgement of the lives you've destroyed. Instead, you continue to attack the very people whose lives you nearly ruined." The judge paused, letting her words sink in. "Ethan Sinclair, you have been found guilty on all charges. Given the severity of your crimes, the calculated nature of your actions, and your complete lack of remorse, I hereby sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole." The gavel struck with finality. Ethan's shoulders slumped slightly, the first real crack in his composure. 2 federal marshals approached to take him into custody. As they led him past the gallery, Ethan turned toward Imani, his face twisting into one final bitter smile. "You'll always wonder if I'm still out there," he hissed. Imani met his gaze steadily, her voice clear and strong. "And you'll always know that I won." The marshals pulled Ethan away, his expensive shoes squeaking against the polished floor. The heavy doors closed behind them with a definitive thud, marking the end of his reign of terror and the beginning of his life behind bars. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Imani's bedroom walls as she opened her eyes. For the first time in what felt like forever, her chest wasn't tight with anxiety. The familiar knot of worry that had been her constant companion was gone, replaced by a gentle sense of peace. She stretched lazily, savoring the quiet moment. Through her open window, she could hear the rhythmic bounce of a basketball and Malik's infectious laughter floating up from the backyard. The sound made her smile. Wrapping herself in a soft robe, Imani stepped onto her balcony. The early morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the sweet scent of blooming jasmine from her garden. Below, Jamal and Malik were engaged in an intense game of one-on-one basketball. Malik had inherited his father's natural athleticism, and watching them play together made her heart swell. "Come on, Dad," Malik called out, dribbling the ball with growing confidence. "You're getting slow." Jamal's deep laugh echoed through the yard. "Oh yeah? Watch this, young man." He playfully blocked Malik's shot, but let the ball slip through his fingers just enough for Malik to recover it and score. Imani leaned against the balcony railing, taking in the scene. Just months ago, this simple moment would have seemed impossible. She had been engaged to Ethan, believing she was making the right choice for her family. Now, looking back, she could hardly recognize that version of herself, the woman who had almost married a monster while the love of her life suffered in prison. But there was no bitterness in her heart anymore. The anger and guilt that had eaten away at her for years had transformed into something else: strength. Every challenge, every moment of doubt, every tear sheet had led her here to this peaceful morning with her family whole again. Inside, she started the coffee maker, its familiar gurgle a comforting sound. As she reached for her favorite mug, the doorbell rang. Tasha stood on the other side, holding 2 cups from their favorite coffee shop. "I brought reinforcements," Tasha announced with a grin, holding up the drinks. "Though I see you've already got some brewing." "You know me too well," Imani laughed, welcoming her friend inside. "The more coffee, the better." They settled at the kitchen island where sunlight streamed through the windows. Outside, Malik had convinced Jamal to give him a piggyback ride around the yard, their joyful shouts providing a perfect backdrop to the morning. "Look at you," Tasha said softly, studying Imani's face. "I haven't seen you this relaxed in years." Imani wrapped her hands around her coffee cup, feeling its warmth. "It's strange, isn't it? For so long I was just surviving, going through the motions, trying to protect Malik, trying to make the best of things. I didn't realize how heavy that burden was until it was gone." "You carried it well," Tasha observed, "but I like seeing you without it better." She paused, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "So what now? What does Imani Carter do with her fresh start?" The question made Imani smile. It wasn't asked with pressure or expectation, but with genuine curiosity and support. "Now," she said, "we move forward. No more looking over our shoulders. No more second-guessing every decision. Just living, loving, being a family." "Any regrets?" Tasha asked. Imani shook her head. "Not anymore. Everything that happened, even the painful parts, they made me stronger. They brought us here. And here is exactly where we're supposed to be." Through the kitchen window, she watched as Malik attempted to teach Jamal some new basketball move he'd learned at school. Jamal's face was bright with pride and love, even as he stumbled through the complicated footwork. "You know what's funny?" Imani mused. "For years I thought I was protecting Malik by keeping the truth from him. But he was stronger than I gave him credit for. He never stopped believing in his father, even when I had my doubts." "Kids have a way of seeing through the noise," Tasha agreed. "They go straight to the heart of things." The back door swung open and Malik bounded in, his face flushed from playing. "Mom, Dad's pretending he can't do a crossover dribble, but I know he's faking. Come show him how it's done." Jamal appeared behind him, pretending to be offended. "Oh, so your mom's got better moves than me now? Come play with us, Imani," he called, his eyes twinkling with challenge and affection. Imani looked at Tasha, who was already shooing her toward the door. Go, her friend insisted. Show these boys how it's done. Standing up, Imani felt light, free, ready. This was what she had fought for. Not just justice, not just clearing Jamal's name, but these simple moments of joy and connection. The ability to just be together, to play, to laugh, to love without fear or restraint. "You're on," she called back, heading for the door. It was time to live life on her own terms, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world. And she couldn't think of a better way to start. The community center buzzed with excitement as Imani and Malik made their way through the crowded entrance. Colorful banners hung from the walls, announcing Second Chance Foundation, because everyone deserves justice. The large hall was packed with people, some in suits and formal wear, others in casual clothes, but all wearing bright, hopeful expressions. Malik tugged at his tie, a miniature version of his father's. "Mom, there are so many people here." His eyes widened as he took in the scene. "That's because what your father is doing matters," Imani replied, squeezing his hand. She recognized faces in the crowd. Lawyers, activists, families who had been through similar ordeals. Some nodded in recognition, offering warm smiles. Near the stage, Tasha waved them over. She was wearing a Second Chance Foundation t-shirt and holding a clipboard. "There you are. Jamal's been asking for you both." They found Jamal in a small room off the main hall, reviewing his speech notes. When he looked up and saw them, his whole face lit up. The past year had transformed him. Gone was the haunted look in his eyes, replaced by purpose and determination. He stood straighter, smiled easier, lived fuller. "My two favorite people," he said, pulling Malik into a hug. "How's my tie looking, son?" "Crooked," Malik grinned, reaching up to adjust it. "But I'll fix it." Imani watched them together, her heart swelling. These simple moments, a father and son fixing each other's ties, sharing jokes, being normal, were once just distant dreams. Now they were everyday blessings. "You ready?" she asked Jamal softly. He nodded, taking a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be. Having you both here makes it easier." The main hall filled quickly. Rows of chairs were occupied by people whose lives had been touched by wrongful convictions. Families separated, lives disrupted, dreams deferred. But there was hope in the air, thick and tangible. Sean Mathis sat in the press section, notebook ready. He caught Imani's eye and gave a quick thumbs up. His exposé on Ethan's crimes had earned him a Pulitzer nomination. But more importantly, it had helped bring attention to the broader issue of wrongful convictions. When Jamal took the stage, the room fell silent. Imani and Malik stood at the front, their faces upturned, hearts full of pride. Under the bright lights, Jamal looked both vulnerable and powerful. "A year ago," he began, his voice steady, "I was in a cell, thousands of miles from home, convinced I would die there." He paused, letting the weight of those words sink in. "But I'm not here to talk about what was taken from me. I'm here to talk about what was given back and what we can give back to others." Malik slipped his hand into Imani's, squeezing tight. She looked down at her son, seeing in his face the perfect blend of both his parents, Jamal's strength, her determination. "Second chances aren't just about freedom," Jamal continued. "They're about healing, about rebuilding, about remembering who you were while discovering who you can become." His eyes found Imani's in the crowd. "Sometimes the people who believe in us the most are the ones we hurt the deepest, and sometimes, if we're very lucky, they're the ones who fight the hardest to bring us home." The crowd listened intently as Jamal outlined the foundation's mission: legal support, counseling services, job training, family reunification programs. Each initiative was born from his own experience, each solution crafted from personal understanding of the challenges faced by those re-entering society after wrongful imprisonment. "We can't erase the past," he said, his voice growing stronger. "But we can build a better future, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who's ever been told their story was over when it was really just beginning." As applause filled the room, Imani watched Jamal on stage, seeing him as if for the first time. This wasn't the young man she'd fallen in love with, nor the broken man who'd returned from prison. This was someone new, someone who had taken his pain and transformed it into purpose, someone who had every reason to be bitter, but chose hope instead. The crowd rose to their feet cheering. Malik whooped loudly, his face beaming with pride. Jamal looked down at them both, his eyes shining with tears and something else, a quiet joy, a settled peace. In that moment, looking up at him, Imani saw their future stretched out before them. Not perfect, not without challenges, but real and possible, and theirs for the making. The autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Jamal sat on the front porch, his eyes fixed on Malik practicing layups in the driveway. The rhythmic bounce of the basketball echoed through the quiet neighborhood, a sound that still felt surreal to him after years of harsh prison noise. His son's determined expression, the way his tongue stuck out slightly when he concentrated, these were the little things Jamal had missed during those dark years. The wooden porch steps creaked as Malik dribbled, faked left, then spun right before taking his shot. The ball bounced off the rim, and Jamal instinctively called out, "Keep your elbow in, son." The words felt strange in his mouth, like he wasn't sure he had the right to offer advice anymore. Malik grabbed the ball and looked over, a brief smile crossing his face before he tried again, this time keeping his elbow tucked closer to his body. The ball sailed through the net with a satisfying swish. "Nice shot," Jamal said softly, more to himself than to Malik. His hands trembled slightly as he ran them over his face, feeling the rough stubble that had replaced his prison-regulated clean shave. The screen door opened behind him, and Imani's familiar presence settled beside him on the porch step. She handed him a steaming cup of chamomile tea, his new comfort drink since coffee made his anxiety spike these days. The ceramic mug felt warm against his palms, grounding him in the present moment. "You've been out here for hours," Imani said gently, no judgment in her voice, just observation. Jamal nodded, taking a careful sip. "I don't know where I fit in anymore," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "Everything's different now. The world moved on without me, and I'm trying to catch up, but..." He trailed off, watching Malik attempt another shot. Imani shifted closer, their shoulders touching. "You're not who you were, Jamal," she said thoughtfully. "But you're still the man Malik looks up to. I see it in his eyes every time he glances your way." "He barely knows me," Jamal protested, though his voice cracked slightly. "He knows enough," Imani replied firmly. "He knows you were wrongly accused. He knows you never stopped loving him. He knows you're trying now, and that matters more than you think." Malik's basketball bounced off the backboard and rolled toward the porch. Without thinking, Jamal reached down and stopped it with his hand. Malik jogged over, slightly out of breath, his face flushed from exertion. "Dad," he said, the words still new and precious between them. "Want to play horse?" Jamal hesitated, looking down at his tea, then at Imani. She nodded encouragingly. "I'm probably pretty rusty," he warned, setting his mug aside. Malik shrugged. "That's okay, I can teach you some moves." The simple offer, his son teaching him something, made Jamal's chest tighten with emotion. He stood up slowly, his joints still stiff from years of prison mattresses. "You know," Imani called as they walked toward the hoop, "being rusty just means you have room to improve, and time to practice." Jamal caught the ball as Malik passed it to him. The texture of the basketball felt foreign, yet familiar under his fingertips. He bounced it once, twice, muscle memory slowly returning. "I think I just need time," he said finally, attempting a shot. The ball hit the rim but didn't go in. Imani smiled warmly, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "You've got all the time in the world." Malik retrieved the ball, bringing it back to his father. "Here," he said, positioning himself next to Jamal. "Watch how I do it." He demonstrated his shooting form, explaining each step with the patience of a natural teacher. Jamal watched, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. Maybe he didn't need to figure out exactly where he fit in the world just yet. Maybe, for now, learning to shoot baskets with his son was enough of a place to start. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen windows as Malik bounced excitedly at the breakfast table, his cereal getting soggy and forgotten. His eyes sparkled with anticipation as he looked between his parents. "So, can you both come?" Malik asked again, his voice filled with hope. "Parents' Day is going to be awesome. We get to show everyone what our parents do, and there's going to be presentations and everything." Jamal sat quietly, stirring his coffee without taking a sip. His shoulders tensed slightly, and he glanced uncertainly at Imani. The thought of facing a room full of parents and teachers made his stomach churn. Would they know about his past? Would they whisper and stare? Imani caught his hesitation and stepped in smoothly. "Of course, baby. We'll both be there." She placed a gentle hand on Jamal's shoulder, feeling the tension beneath his shirt. Malik pumped his fist in the air. "Yes. Tommy's always bragging about his dad being a firefighter, but my dad—" He paused, realizing he didn't actually know what his father did now. The momentary confusion flickered across his face. Jamal's hands tightened around his coffee mug. "Malik, I don't know if—" "Your dad," Imani interrupted, "is starting a non-profit organization to help people who've been wrongly accused. That's pretty important work, isn't it?" Malik's eyes widened. "Really? That's so cool. Can you talk about that at Parents' Day?" Jamal shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "I don't know, son. It's complicated. Some people might not understand." "But that's why you should come," Malik insisted, his spoon clattering against the bowl. "People need to know. You're helping people, Dad. That's way cooler than putting out fires." After Malik left to get his backpack, Imani turned to Jamal. "Talk to me. What's going on in that head of yours?" Jamal ran a hand over his face. "These parents, they'll know who I am. They'll see me walk in and think ex-con. They'll wonder why their kids are in the same class as my son." "No," Imani said firmly. "They'll see a father who loves his son, a man who survived injustice and came out stronger. You're more than what happened to you, Jamal." "Am I?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Sometimes I still wake up thinking I'm in that cell. Sometimes I look in the mirror and don't recognize myself." Imani stepped closer, taking his hands in hers. "That's exactly why you need to go. Not just for Malik, but for yourself. You can't hide from the world forever." "I'm not hiding," Jamal protested weakly. "Aren't you?" Imani's voice was gentle but firm. "You've been free for months, but you barely leave the house except for work. You're still living like you're trapped." Malik bounded back into the kitchen, backpack slung over one shoulder. "Found my permission slip. You guys just need to sign it." Jamal looked at the paper his son thrust toward him, then at Malik's hopeful face. He remembered his own father missing every important moment in his life, always too busy or too drunk to show up. He'd promised himself he'd be different. "Okay," he said finally, reaching for a pen. "I'll be there." Malik's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? You promise?" "I promise." Jamal managed a small smile, signing the permission slip with slightly shaky hands. "It's gonna be the best day ever," Malik exclaimed, hugging both his parents quickly before heading for the door. "Everyone's gonna see how cool my dad is." As they watched their son practically skip out the door, Imani and Jamal exchanged a look. There was fear in Jamal's eyes, but also determination. This wasn't just about Parents' Day anymore. This was about reclaiming his place in the world, about showing his son that past wounds didn't have to define your future. "Ready for this?" Imani asked softly. "No," Jamal admitted. "But I'm going anyway." They stood together in the morning light, watching Malik climb onto the school bus. Their son turned to wave enthusiastically through the window, his smile bright enough to chase away any lingering shadows of doubt. As they walked out the door, Malik's grin was infectious. "It's gonna be the best day ever." His enthusiasm filled the morning air with possibility. Jamal and Imani exchanged a look, sharing a moment of understanding. This wasn't just another school event. It was a step toward healing, toward normalcy, toward the future they'd fought so hard to reclaim. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Malik's school auditorium, casting warm patterns across the polished floor. Imani and Jamal stood just inside the entrance, taking in the scene before them. The space buzzed with the cheerful chatter of parents and teachers, while excited children darted between clusters of adults. Jamal tugged at his collar, his nervousness evident in the way he shifted his weight from foot to foot. He wore a crisp blue button-down shirt and his best slacks, but Imani could see the uncertainty in his eyes. This was his first time in such a public setting since the media coverage of his exoneration. "You okay?" Imani whispered, giving his hand a quick squeeze. Before Jamal could answer, Malik came bounding over, his face lit up with excitement. "Dad! Mom! You're here!" He grabbed Jamal's other hand and started pulling him toward a group of his classmates. "Come on, I want everyone to meet you." As they moved through the crowd, the whispers began. Imani caught fragments of conversations. "Isn't that the man from the news? The one who was wrongly convicted? Did you see the story about corruption?" But Malik seemed oblivious to the murmurs, or perhaps he simply didn't care. He was too busy introducing his father to everyone within reach. "This is my friend Tommy, and that's Ms. Peterson, my science teacher, and over there is—" When they reached the front of the auditorium, where other parents were gathering to speak, Malik suddenly turned to address his entire class. His voice rang out clear and strong. "This is my hero, my real dad." The simple declaration brought an immediate hush to the room. Jamal's eyes glistened as he looked down at his son, and Imani felt her heart swell with pride for both of them. Malik's teacher, Mrs. Thompson, stepped forward with a warm smile. "Mr. Carter, would you like to say a few words to the class?" Jamal hesitated, but Malik's encouraging nod gave him the courage to step up to the small podium. He cleared his throat, his hands gripping the edges of the wooden stand. He started shakily, then took a deep breath. "I never thought I'd be standing here today. For years I was separated from my son, from my family, because of a terrible injustice." As he spoke, his voice grew steadier, stronger. "But I never gave up hope. Even in my darkest moments, I held on to the belief that the truth would come out, that someday I would see my son again." The audience listened intently, drawn in by the raw honesty in his words. Parents leaned forward in their seats, and even the most fidgety children sat still. "Justice isn't always swift," Jamal continued, his confidence building. "Sometimes it takes years of fighting, of believing, of refusing to let go. But the truth has a way of coming to light, especially when you have people in your corner who never stop fighting for you." He glanced at Imani, who stood at the side of the room, tears shining in her eyes. "My son calls me his hero, but the real heroes are the ones who never gave up on me, who taught me that second chances are possible, that redemption isn't just a word in a dictionary." Several parents were nodding now, some wiping away tears of their own. The whispers had transformed into murmurs of approval and understanding. "To all the children here today," Jamal said, his voice strong and clear, "remember that justice and truth are worth fighting for. That no matter how dark things seem, there's always hope. And most importantly, remember that family isn't just about blood. It's about the people who stand by you, who believe in you, even when the whole world seems to be against you." Malik beamed from his seat in the front row, his chest puffed out with pride. Several of his classmates were looking at him with new respect, seeing him and his family in a different light. As Jamal finished speaking, the auditorium erupted in applause. Parents and teachers stood, offering a standing ovation that seemed to wash away any remaining tension or uncertainty. Stepping down from the podium, Jamal found himself surrounded by parents wanting to shake his hand, to express their support and admiration. But his eyes sought out Imani, who made her way through the crowd to his side. "Thank you for believing in me," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Imani nodded, unable to speak as tears filled her eyes. In that moment, she realized that they had both healed, not just individually, but together. The broken pieces of their family had finally found their way back to each other, stronger at the mended places than they had ever been before. Over a quiet candlelit dinner, Jamal and Imani share a heartfelt moment, finally confessing they never stopped loving each other. Despite their years of pain and separation, they recognize how their struggles have made them stronger. As Malik types away at his homework, secretly listening, Jamal reaches for Imani's hand. "Let's start over," he says. She smiles warmly. We already have. At the Second Chances Foundation Gala, Jamal confidently addresses the crowd, announcing the expansion of his organization to help the wrongfully convicted rebuild their lives. Malik beams with pride, declaring, "This is the best day ever," as he rushes into his father's arms, igniting laughter and applause. Later, under a starlit sky, Jamal promises Imani, "No matter where life takes us, I'll always choose you." Hand in hand, they move forward as a family, whole, hopeful, and embracing the beauty of second chances. If you enjoyed the story of Jamal, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.